Hey, everybody, this is Drew Burdick with another episode of the Building Great Experiences podcast. With me, I have my friend and marketing genius, Blair Primis. We met, I don't know, probably a year or so ago.
About that, yeah.
We had a mutual friend. I host these marketing leader dinners, and Blair came out. We fast friends. I would
Agreed.
call it. Yeah.
Agreed.
So anyways, we've had a lot of good conversations over the last year, just coffees and chats and stuff. And so today we're going to be talking about healthcare experience.
Yes.
Which is sticky, which will be a good one.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Blair, why don't you introduce yourself, tell the audience who you are and where you're from.
Blair Primis. I'm currently a fractional CMO for a number of local groups here in town. My wife and I have a consultancy called Primtos. Her last name is Santos, so we just did the fancy marketing thing and just jammed the two words together. There it was.
There you go.
I've got a long background in marketing, long background, 25 plus years. Agency guy, big giant corporate guy, worked for McDonald's, worked for Audi, spent a little bit of time at Bank of America, and then migrated in 2009 into healthcare, specifically with Ortho Carolina. Spent some time at a outpatient surgery center company called SCA Health, a little bit of time at a PE-backed oral maxillofacial group here in town as well. And now out on my own, trying to support organizations through sort of fractional marketing leadership. But yeah, 16-ish, roughly 16 or so years in specialty healthcare marketing.
A little bit of a veteran, right?
Yeah. So there's some.
Yeah.
So the scars are real.
Yeah.
The scars are real. Yeah. But
right.
so are the wins.
Yeah. Well, great. So today I thought we would talk about something that I love and something that we've talked about, which is the intersection of customer experience and healthcare. And I wanted to dig into it because I think, first of all, healthcare is one of the few things where if you make an impact, it's going to actually help people's lives, right? Mm-hmm. There's my career, I've done a lot of let's make this, retail experience better, or let's make this banking experience better, which valuable, right? Mm-hmm. But healthcare really is, you're truly impacting people's lives. And so I think it's a really important topic. And frankly, a lot of healthcare, providers aren't doing enough. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, right? You've been through this, you've seen the good, bad, and ugly. You kind of know where some of the bodies are buried, right? And the regulations that inhibit us. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on, where are the opportunities? Where do you think healthcare providers should be investing for the future? Yeah,
it's such a deep, right? This is such a deep and wide category, to dive into, right? So if you just at the super macro level, if you think about it, right? So 4.9 trillion with a T is the size of U.S. healthcare. So if you put that in perspective, I think global GDP, it goes the United States, China, United States healthcare. Wow. So it's, I think, larger than Germany, Japan, Brazil. It's just healthcare. So 18 or 19% of GDP is dedicated to U.S. healthcare. So if you think about it from a capitalist perspective and say, I'm going to invest 20% of my revenue into a business, nobody would anticipate that we would tolerate the results that U.S. healthcare provides, right? So as a business, it's probably like a D. I don't know. It helps people. People love their physicians. There's amazing doctors, amazing technology, amazing drugs that make people healthy, help them recover, live long lives. But if you think about it as a business, right, like just strictly a business, man, it is tough. So having said all of that, there's just so much opportunity to make these small incremental changes, right? You can't eat the whole elephant here. This is not like hey, next year we'll fix healthcare. Like, no, this is like in our lifetimes, Drew, like probably won't be holistically better, like realistically, right? You're talking, this is a big cruise ship to maneuver. Yeah. So ideally, what I have tried to do is think about this intersection of, marketing and in this case, patient experience, user or customer, but in this case, patient experience. And how do you blend the two of those together to think about differentiation of a brand or a product, but identifying that at the end of the day, this is about making sure that these small incremental changes, and that's a loose term, right? Because depending on the size of the org, it could financially be a big number. But in the grand scheme of things, you're not going to even scratch the surface of all the things that go into U.S. healthcare complex. And what I find fascinating about it is the talent in the industry. It's changing a little bit now, but really since like the 60s, the talent was never taught about the business. So you go to college, you go to medical school, you do a residency. If you're a surgeon, you do a surgical fellowship, and then you go into practice. You haven't taught how to balance a P&L.
Yeah, right.
You don't know how to manage overhead. You don't know why one drug costs more than another. You don't know how to operationalize or make anything efficient in your organization. Not only have you never been taught it, you're literally almost ignorant about it. Like you just don't even know it exists, right?
Yep.
It's like some things must happen in places in the world that I just truly have no clue are happening because I'm not aware of them, right? It's the same thing here. So there's a very interesting dynamic in which you have hospital systems that have administrators with MBAs and business classes who run businesses, and the talent they manage have this, they're the talent, but they don't necessarily understand how the business runs. And then in private practice, you have physicians who are empowered, who surround themselves with talent, and hopefully they find the right group to try to accelerate and make their business successful. And then you have, like government healthcare, which is, trying to maximize how we keep our population healthy and what our tax dollars go to. And it's just really an interesting business when you think about it. I don't know that necessarily Tom Brady knows all of the economics of how the Patriots worked, but he knew enough to know that like we had to fill the seats. We need, the better we are, the more we can charge, the TV station can charge for commercials. Like there's some knowledge to it, but there's just a basic gap there that I find. And whittling this down even further, maybe one of the most obvious areas where all of us consume is healthcare. You can't not consume it, whether you have a sniffly nose or a kid that gets an ear infection or you hurt your knee or whatever it might be. I would be hard pressed to find someone who hasn't consumed it in some way, even just going to the ER, right? So the idea that patient experience has not been a central theme in that industry is a little bit like, what on earth have we been doing? Right. And it's, I think, because there is the talent that is in their space, focused on what they do day in and day out, and they are world class at it. There is a knowledge set and a skill set that I can't even contemplate on how to do and or even learn how to do, let alone I'm wimpy stomach, and I'm not sure I would do really well with like blood and guts and stuff like that. But it is a very clear and obvious thing. And the joke, half joke, I usually tell to kind of sum up this spiel here is, I'm yet to meet someone who wakes up in the morning and says to me, I am pumped to go to the doctor today. Which is just like the barometer for expectations are low, that this experience will not be good. And so can you be in a place where you flip that on its head and rethink, if we made organizations user-centric and operational or financial secondary, or maybe 1 and 1A, right? Because I get it. The goal of any business is to stay in business. I understand how this works. But there is some component. If we created a user-centric organization, would we also not only be in the best interest of the stakeholders, but the patients? And my gut tells me we actually would make enough money to stay in business. So like, there you go. There's sort of like my, 30,000 feet. Maybe I got down to 10,000, but close enough. I think it's just such an interesting way to think about the world.
Totally. Yeah, I think so. There's a few things I want to like dissect a little bit more. So one is, you mentioned like incremental, which I think is exactly right. Like broad strokes, you're not going to be able to just transform healthcare, right? There's a lot of
regulation, law, structure.
Things have been in place for a long time.
Technology gaps,
right? Yeah. But I think that even though you have to take an incremental approach, I think consumer expectations are now at an all-time high, right? Where you're like, why is it so hard for me to book a physician that I know is good? Like, why is it so hard that all these sort of like, hey, if I can go get, bank account set up in 5 seconds on my phone, like, why do I need to go do all this nonsense?
True.
So I think that what I anticipate is over the next decade, as younger generations are coming into more of a call it buying power position, right? You've got folks who are sort of raised with digital as primary, as you have folks who are accustomed to a certain level of ease and convenience, as well as like not just ease and convenience, but care, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think you're gonna start to see consumers are gonna start to shift the priorities, because I think healthcare providers are gonna start to see, someone who's got like, especially if it's outpatient type of a thing,
Right.
and be like, you know what, I'm gonna go 2 states over to get better care from those guys because they're doing this, whatever. And like, just to give a really quick example, there's a dentist office that opened in Harrisburg, is where I live, and it's really funny because previously we were in network with like this other dentist, and it was like exactly what you would expect, right? Like, very not friendly, very whatever. Just abysmal experience. And my wife just happened to hear from somebody else. They were like, "Hey, you should go check out this other place." And it turned out it was closest to us, but these people are driving from like several counties over to come to this dentist that's like incredibly nice. And they have like, there's a whole bunch of stuff around the kids, and they have like this gift box, like treasure box thing, and they have this like, when you lay down, there's like screens in the ceiling, and it doesn't feel like the sterile environment, and like the actual dentists are like super friendly and genuine and whatever. Anyway, the point is, people are willing to drive from far away to come to there, and I think what it's going to start to do is you're going to see these other places who are like, wait, whoa, why are our patients leaving? Right. Especially when you talk about like private practice, they're going to be like, whoa, come back. Right.
Yeah. What happened?
Yeah. And I think that,
and that's a good way to think about it, right? There's an idea of like everything is in the rearview mirror.
Yeah. Right.
Like, whoa, look at all the people leaving. Yeah. I can see them going.
Yeah,
like, what happened? Now it's too late.
Yep. And like, there's this concept of a lot of times, I know you're a marketer, so like many marketers think about it as like, how do we get as many people in the front door as possible? But they forget about closing the back door, right? So you end up having a whole bunch of people going out the back door, and then you're like, wait, what? And so you're having to work twice as hard or more because you're putting all your money and effort into acquisition, right? In this case, you're trying to get more patients to come to you, but you're forgetting about the fact that like you have your back door is wide open. Like,
it's critical.
Probably think about that, right?
It's critical. And again, and this is a conversation I have in present day, like very current conversations with physician leadership. And over the years and decades with a lot of the docs I've worked at, where you say, be careful what you wish for. If the marketing is successful and we send them to a poor experience, did we do what we wanted to do? Yep. Right. And it's just that piece of operational and user experience comes first. Marketing comes second. In healthcare, that is not hypothesis. That is fact. Yeah. If you aren't good at it, do not tell anyone about it.
Yeah. If you can't deliver on the promise that you're making in your marketing,
what are we doing?
Yeah,
what are we doing? Right? What are we doing?
Yep.
My very first job at a college, worked for McCann Erickson, and their slogan is "Truth well told." And like that is exactly the case in healthcare.
Yeah.
Like if we are good at it and we can deliver, tell everyone about it.
Yeah.
If anything other than that statement is true, wait on the marketing. Wait on it. Work on the other components that marketing inhabits, lowercase m. Like how can marketing be comprehensive in the organization as opposed to what could potentially be seen as an investment that the numbers look good, the phone's ringing, the appointments are booking. But, when you look at satisfaction and, like you said, the back doors, everyone's sort of like, I'm not coming back here. Like, okay, so did we win? Like, was that good? It's a really interesting balance.
Yeah.
Especially where I think expectations just sadly are just so low. It's most often you hear someone revel in a great experience because it's the anomaly. Whereas you would hope in other industries, it's the poor experience that's the anomaly.
Right.
And that's the battle. This is just the decades long battle that every practice, all of healthcare is battling.
Yeah. So I think what's really interesting, and we remiss not to talk about this, is this notion that, okay, patient experience matters. But sometimes the way that you improve it is not by looking directly at it, so to speak, but there's actually the things that are kind of around it. And by that, I mean, if you look at like the staff experience or practitioner experience and the things that are, if you enable your staff to do their jobs better and they don't hate their job, they don't, they're equipped with the tools and technology to be able to do it where they have a bit more time to breathe.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Then they're going to
think.
right, and think, they're going to be able to provide a better experience for patients. And I just spoke with this woman recently who has started a company it's all about ambulatory focused, like giving them data so that they can manage their schedule, as groundbreaking as that may sound, right? Like allowing doctors and physicians, whatever, to manage their schedule in a way that is best suited for them, which means that they're happier, which means that they can take better care of the patients. And so it's like back to your original point on incremental, like this isn't rocket science, right? It's like, hey, your staff are people too. How do you make sure that they are having a good time of it, that they really, like COVID, the amount of like craziness that happened and people were, getting like bruises on their face from wearing masks and stuff. Like, how do you make sure your staff feels like they're cared for and empowered? Because if they feel that way, I mean, a lot of people get into healthcare because they want to help people. Yeah, right.
Absolutely. So, actually, the vast majority of people I meet are like this. The win is like, I see people walk out smiling. Yeah. Like that's it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're enabling them to do that more effectively, then your patient experience will soar.
Absolutely.
Right? And so,
absolutely. Yeah. And it's interesting, I'd be curious to go back in time and, maybe look through, 5, 10 years, 15 years of decision making at the highest levels of these healthcare organizations to say, at what point was maximizing the patient experience determined to be not value add? Like, is an X-ray machine as important as patient experience? You know what I mean? Like, we need the X-ray machine. Okay, but if you can't get them in, or if the experience getting them in, like, where do you value the investment? And so companies that prioritize this and are willing to spend the money on it are really the ones that marketing departments should look at and say, okay, guess what we're about to do? We're about to tell everybody that the organization that you are potentially choosing for your care is working devoutly to improve the experience for you, the team member, and the provider or practitioner. Like, that is, in other businesses, like, that's not novel at all. But in healthcare, it is novel. It is really novel. And the idea of being patient-centered has been bastardized in many cases, in which case really what that meant was we had a patient advocate you could call, or a navigator who helps you through it, which is wonderful. Concierge is terrific. And if I had a number I could call, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, call Blair, great. Fantastic. Hey, it's Blair. How can I help you? Oh, click this button, do this. Love that. High cost, unreliable, long wait times. Humans are subjected to sometimes having a bad day. I mean, like, this is just how it goes, right? So it's interesting. I think, your point is a good one, that this incrementality of success can be the energy you need sometimes in the organization to say, look what we did over here. Let's try to do that again. Let's try it in this sector or this segment or this organization or this. And if you can find a couple of quick ones that you can do easy and knock them out, and all of a sudden the organization starts to look around and say, okay, wait a minute. I'm actually part of change. Now we're cooking with gas, right? Exactly. This is cool.
Yeah. I had this really interesting coffee this morning, and it was this guy who runs a company with a couple of partners where it's all about background music experience. Super fascinating.
Really interesting.
So
like subliminal almost. Like
yeah, exactly. Like the impact that background music has, like they call it soundscaping, right? So let's say that you go to a grocery store, or you go to maybe a doctor's, office or whatever. Someone has to pick the music, or they don't, right? And that's usually what happens. Nobody is programmatically structuring it. So it's like, what do we want people to feel? How do we want, like, what memories do we want to evoke? Whatever, right? And we had this really interesting dialogue about how so much of our world there's sounds that we're not really consciously thinking about, but it directly affects our experience, right? So, for example, one of the things you were saying is, like, in a grocery store, you're walking around, they actually try to time the BPM to the shopping cart so that it kind of matches the rhythm.
Fascinating.
Right. And they don't want to do anything that's like trying to get you out the door really quick, but they also don't want to do anything that slows you down, makes you stay forever. Right. They do that in restaurants as well. Right. Like, they try to time it so that it like you feel this sense of urgency, or you don't, right? Depending on what they're trying to do. And so I feel like
a science to the art.
Yeah. Right. And so I bring this up because I think that in healthcare, like what I've heard commonly, and I think you probably have it too, is this like, well, we can't do that because of all the reasons we can't do it, right?
Right.
There's regulation and then HIPAA and da 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 da. But I think there's things that will affect the experience positively or negatively if you don't pay attention to it, that are kind of like outside of that world, right? Like another example.
That's a wonderful example, actually.
Yeah, right. Like
terrific example.
What kind of music are you putting in the space? And actually, this guy I was talking to, he mentioned his wife has some sort of debilitating disease, and they were in a hospital. I won't say which one, and they were going through this process. And on the TV, like the programming, it was like I guess they had like a music video, whatever channel. And it was like, I think there was like a song. It was like, "Go kill yourself" or something like that.
Yeah, it was like,
and there's just
hardcore, like so inappropriate, like just a miss.
Or like,
just a miss.
Why is this playing
What's
in like a hospital right now? And so it's like it's things like that, right?
Yeah,
that you may not really think about as part of the experience, but do make a meaningful impact on people's lives. And so if you're thinking about, okay, if every touch point with a patient is considered, and there are these things that are kind of like they aren't really part of like what's under HIPAA or PHI, whatever.
Totally.
Like maybe those are the things you can do and
love that
really
approach.
Move the needle and it not require a whole bunch of like red tape cutting.
Love that approach. Love that approach. So I would tell you two comments there. One is, and it hasn't. I'm not sure it's come out yet, but there's a documentary about to come out about John Williams, the orchestra.
Yeah.
And it was
like Star Wars,
50,
right?
like 50 Emmy, 50 Oscars for all the
Indiana
stuff.
Jones or something. Yeah.
And there's a quote in just the preview. I think it's Steven Spielberg says like, "Do me a favor, go watch Jaws with the mute button on.
Yeah.
Now go watch it with the sound on."
Yeah.
And like that's the difference. Like that's it, right? So there's that. And then secondarily, I will tell you, a lot like we just described, you realize when it's not good. If you go to a restaurant or you're somewhere and the music doesn't vibe, you immediately notice
you're like,
it doesn't vibe.
Yeah.
Whereas if it is vibing, you probably don't realize you're vibing with it.
Yeah, right.
And so that's that component of it where like the flow is there. There's a vibe that's there.
Yep.
Whereas the risk is it becomes an anti-vibe or it stops the flow.
Yep.
And that's the thing to avoid.
Yep.
Right? It isn't like don't choose the negative, but you get my point. Like you'll sit down to dinner and be like, why is this plan? I'm having an Italian meal and red wine, and all of a sudden I have like, Metallica on, or whatever, like, and I love Metallica, but you get my point. Like, it's just an odd thing. Yeah. And so I hear you. I think it's a cool idea, actually.
Yeah.
And I think very just quick segment here, like as an entrepreneur for that guy, cool business model to tackle healthcare.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Which was one of the comment we were like talking about that whole universe. I think so. One other thing I was thinking about in this kind of same vein was this idea that like I've described this as like there's different altitudes of experience. So product is like kind of the digital thing or whatever physical thing that the customer is using. There's service, which is kind of end to end across multiple different parts of the experience. Brand experience, which is a cumulative sum of all of the different touch points you have with your customer. Yeah. And then the kind of highest levels ecosystem. And I think where healthcare providers can really start to look at, improving is in the ecosystem of healthcare. Like, what does the referral experience look like? What is it if I'm a patient, I'm going from, like simple stuff like, I have like receding gum line on one of my teeth or whatever. And the experience of being transferred to a periodontist was like so painful. I'm like, you're literally printing a piece of paper for me. And then you're like,
oh yeah. And there's a dirty word in healthcare that still exists. And 3 letters in it. FAX. We still fax things. Like what?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Right.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So I think in the healthcare ecosystem, there's just like really low hanging fruit that, regulations are not like you can do that. Like it's not that complicated, right? People have, it's a solvable problem that people have solved.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think in the challenge in healthcare in many cases is, and I just being adjacent to it and part of it and sitting in meetings here, right? It typically comes down to, do we want to spend the money to fix that or are willing to tolerate a poor experience because they got to come to us anyway?
Yeah, right.
And that's the maybe not problem, but that's the delta. The delta is somebody has to get in the room and say, wait a minute, this is a priority for us, and we are going to drive change. We will be the catalyst for change in doing this.
Yep.
And I cannot tell you for how long I have sat around and spoken to. I met with a group today where we literally had the conversation like, we've got to improve our patient communications. We have to make this simpler and easier. We have to look at our user journey and crush it down. And like steps 4 through 8 really can just be step 4. Like, why do we have that? Isn't HIPAA. There is no, we can do that.
We're just doing it.
We're just doing it because this is what we learned and trained it, and the button had to go here. And there's just this, it's a little bit of like time for just, dare I say it, but as best you can, flip it on its head and just rewrite it.
Yeah.
And I've been articulating it. I've used your altitude example before. I need to be better at giving you credit for it.
I don't know.
I think I met somebody and they were like, wow, that's brilliant. I was like, thank you. But I like to say that it's this idea of like becoming user centric versus in many cases operation centric. Operations is critical, but it is in the center. It's user centric, and everything else is around it.
Yeah, it's the experience is the North Star, and then it's this idea of like you can orchestrate everything around it, and it's going to drive business outcomes, right? It's going to drive operational efficiency. It's going to drive value, like. People, I think sometimes, like I've heard this case be made, like, oh, well, customers don't know what they want. And you're like, well, yeah, okay. I mean, I hear you, but
sure.
And the amount of times that I've heard the Henry Ford quote,
yeah, exactly.
The people who knew what they wanted, they would have asked for more horses, right? And you're like, that,
okay. Got it.
You're like, but when you're in an industry that's so far behind, you probably need to like pay attention to what they're asking for.
Totally.
Like you're not Henry Ford, man.
Yeah. And I think, you brought up a point earlier that, we should probably address, which is, there was a very, very real generational shift in consumerism. I mean, it is tangibly different where there is a lot of data, from Deloitte and from others, Mayo Clinic, that say at some point, if you are not easy to use, which by the way is like table stakes for most other industries, if you're not easy to use, I don't care how good you are clinically. We will not choose you as a consumer set, right? I mean, like it's not on my app. I can't cancel it. I can't move it. I can't FaceTime you. Like I know there's rules in place, but not for scheduling. I know there are like, these are the things, and these generational shifts are very real. They just will not choose you because you are not convenient. They will not choose you because you're not available when you want to be seen, because we do scheduling because when the doctor wants to see patients, like, oh, I don't work Monday morning. Okay, but that's when I want to come in. Yeah, well, sorry, I don't work Monday morning. Okay, then I'm going to find someone who does, because that's what I have available. I work a third shift and I only have Mondays off. It's the only time I can go. Or my kids go to school daycare that day, so that's when I have to do all my personal health care, because whatever reason you may have, it's got to get there. Like, and what's crazy about the conversation is like, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, I know. Like, we're not talking about rocket science, right?
It's pretty obvious.
We're not like novel, groundbreaking.
Like, so what we do when we land on Mars, what happens is we like, we're like, come on.
Yeah. We're like, hey, maybe you should like,
just answer the phone.
Yeah.
Like it's like, just, just let them send a text. It's
like people are not asking for, a whole bunch of stuff.
I know. It's so interesting. It's so interesting.
Well, I want to, so in transition to part 2 of this conversation, which is all around kind of community-focused marketing, which you have done a lot of. For listeners, just to give quick context, Blair probably won't say this about himself, but he's come up with some really great community-focused marketing campaigns over his time in the last 15, 20 years. And so I want to talk a little bit about that, because I think that it's related to healthcare because you applied it, but also other industries where if you take this more community-focused, long view of marketing, you're going to have better results in the long term, right?
Yes.
So maybe talk a little bit about some of the things you've done, and then some of your perspective on this topic.
No, that's great. Yeah, and I think it ties, it does tie in a very meaningful way to healthcare, because really, at the end of the day, most healthcare is still local. Yes, there's televisits and video visits, and you can diagnose things over the phone, of course, but like really at some point you have to touch a patient, you have to see a patient, you got to look at the stuff.
Right.
So healthcare really, in the end of the day, while global, international, and national in nature, of course, it's really local. So philosophically, I just had a belief many years ago that one of the seemingly best ways to differentiate your brand amongst a crowded marketplace and being beholden to the latest Google algorithm shift or having to outspend somebody 10 times your size, is if you could figure out a way to be integrated into your community so that you were helping them when they didn't need you, then you would be relevant at times when they were doing the things they wanted to do. Because nobody wants to go see a doctor. I know we get an annual physical, which is in theory maybe the only moment which is not about being injured. Otherwise, and maybe the dentist for your 6 month or 9 months, but really you never go unless there's something wrong. So while I know that is our business, doesn't it make sense to flip it on its head and say, what if we approached it as, oh, you like running on the Greenway here in Charlotte? Guess what? We're going to help make that possible. You enjoy going to TED Talks? Guess what? We're going to sponsor those for you. You're interested in, making sure that there's access to fresh water? Guess what? We're going to sponsor that group. And the idea is your life is improved because our organization helped you live the way you want to live in the neighborhood and community you live and work every day. The long play is that they start to realize this is an organization that actually has me in mind when I'm not injured or not hurt or not unhealthy. And therefore, I will choose you when I have a challenge. And you become so respected in their lives that it becomes this spark for people to be like, hey, we should go talk to the folks at X, Y, and Z place. And just to get in the details here, we did this a lot at North Carolina. We went on a really 9 or 10, 11-year journey of spending a good portion of our marketing dollars maximizing our local community relationships, whether it was here in Charlotte or Hickory or Winston-Salem or Fort Mill or Rock Hill or Shelby, wherever. Different levels of investment, different levels of intensity, of course. But the goal was, we're not just going to donate. We're not just going to hang out at an event. We're going to integrate our brand into the local community. And that's the approach that we took. And, without, trying not to step on arrogance or egotism at all, I would tell you that we were sought after by many organizations across the country to say, do you mind if we chat with you? How are you? What are you doing here? What is this? For those organizations that were savvy, they're like, what is North Carolina up to? Yes, we had the benefit of having truly world-class physicians and surgeons, and we had clinical quality at an incredibly high level for a city like Charlotte. Not that that's bad about Charlotte, but you would think New York or LA or something like that. But for Charlotte's size, we have some of the greatest orthopedic surgeons in the country right here. And so we had that at our advantage. And I just believed in differentiation. This was our path. Because for me to say something like, oh, we have the best quality doctors. Well, they're supposed to be. Right? So I'm now just spitting into the wind. This is table stakes. It's supposed to be great. Nobody's like, well, our docs are average. Hopefully you choose us. Like, of course. Of course they are. Right. So quality marketing. I just never believed we ever needed to say that. Because if we're not, what are we doing? This goes back to our earlier conversation. What are we marketing? We should be doing research. We should be testing, new approaches. We should be innovating. We should have docs that invent things, that create approaches, design tools. Like, all of that should be what we do. And I have just been a devout believer that organizations that make the city in which their people live and work cooler tomorrow than it was yesterday, and do that every day for a decade, you can't lose. You just can't lose. There's just more business for everybody to have. Right.
Score takes care of itself.
Just takes care of itself.
I think a lot of organizations and a lot of industries can take a page out of that book. Because, I think about, especially today, right? We're inundated with messages. Right. There's so much content. There's so many things that are like right in our face, and it becomes just like a din of noise that you just end up not paying attention. Right. And I think that what brands are going to do going forward that are really going to help separate them is they're going to have a differentiated experience, and they're going to have a differentiated approach to marketing. That's what's going to happen. Right. And I think that the differentiated approach is going to be, people are going to start to think in a weird way. You're going to think small. Right. Like to your point, like I'm going to think about my community or the community that we serve or the communities that we serve. And how do we start to be embedded in the fabric of that community where to your point, they think of us first when they have a need, and we're not trying to market to them when they have a need. It's like they just come to us because we're
part of their daily lives.
Right. It's not a like,
yep,
oh man, who do I go to for orthopedic care? It's like, well, of course, like I go to Ortho Carolina, right?
Yeah, you know, or even something simpler. In some, yes, that would be the goal, right? The goal is number one goal of any business, stay in business. So we've got to get patients.
Yep.
However, part of the dialogue we would oftentimes say to ourselves is, you know, with a market like Charlotte and other places similar to us, right? Atlanta, Raleigh, Austin, Nashville, places like, you know, 100 new people a day, 110 new people a day, 80 new people a day. They don't know anything about any of our brands. So pedigree is out the window. It does not matter. So if you like to go to the gym and we made that gym class possible, or you go to a brewery run club and that run club is sponsored by us and you're welcome for the t-shirt and the hat or whatever we did, relatively low investment cost, maximal awareness because they're so new to the whole thing. Yep. So get up in that world and do it with intentionality and, you know, some savvy. You know, we got good at this. We got really good at thinking about it. So much so that we had, you know, developed a reputation that this is what our marketing department became known for. Yeah. And I'm just, you know, I don't really ever call it a theory anymore. I'm like, no, this is fact. This is, it's not a hypothesis. This has been proven. Yeah. And it's, you know, important. It's a long play, right? This is a long play. This isn't like, wow, we sponsored a thing and all of a sudden we have 1 million results. Like this is a long play, play. Yeah. We're fortunate. We're in a growing market. You know, we're young. It's a young city. Lots of investment in things that, in areas that are awesome for a city that is young. And so how can organizations stay young and stay nimble? And this is where I think these two things just blend so well together. I think you nailed it, right? Like the future departments you will see in organizations are this combination of UX or PX in the healthcare space and marketing, right? You're going to see like, you know, you're going to see like CMUXOs,
yeah,
right? I mean, like this is what you'll see because they're so closely related, and the overlap is so relevant that this will become the new methodology. You know, how do you partner with organizations to say that while we can't maybe make the software, we do have some input on how it is deployed or how it is set up or we can't make the screen, but we can tell you that it's better vertical than it is horizontal. You know, it's interesting. Yeah, it's fun. No. It's fun. I mean, it's really what we should be doing.
Yeah, I think that, 100%. Like, you know, whatever, CMXO or whatever.
There's
going to be like that connective. It's funny. There's these interesting intersections right now that there's a lot of chief growth officers, which is kind of this infusion of marketing and product, right? But I think that like there's going to be a more and more of a blurry line between product marketing and, you know, experience. Yeah, and I think you're going to start to see that people who came up through one of those, you know, functional areas, they're going to start to be expected to be able to just span across all of it, right?
Yeah,
you're like, hey, exactly. You kind of need to know how to do marketing if you're an experienced person. If you're kind of you're an experienced person, you kind of need to know how to do marketing.
Yeah, yeah, right? or at least have be connected at the hip with somebody who is your, you know,
synchronized.
Yes,
with your,
there you go. Better phrase. Yeah, synchronized and it's aligned. Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah. There's a really interesting. There's a, you know, you always follow these things. You're like, that's a cool brand. There's a European, I think British cereal company called Cereal, but it's spelled like SERIAL, like cereal, but it's they make cereal. Yeah. And they spent a long time identifying the best way to create the healthiest product that tastes good, which oftentimes is part of the challenge there, right? People are like, oh, it's healthy. So everyone assumes it doesn't taste good, right? Because it's not Frosted Flakes or whatever. Yeah, right. They really worked hard at that. And then their marketing campaign, if you get a minute, look it up. It is so creative and so innovative. They bought all these billboards all over town that say things like Michael Jordan loves our cereal, and then an asterisk it says like Michael Jordan is a local man who lives on this street in Charlotte and is not related at all to the Michael Jordan who you think we're talking about. So like they skirted right on the edge of like causing a ruckus, and they did this with hundreds of famous people. You know, like Scarlett Johansson says our cereal's sexy. It's like asterisk Scarlett Johansson lives at such and such Surrey, England. It's not the one you think it is, you know. And I just thought to myself, what a fun way to say. Not only do we take the time to make something different, our marketing is also different.
Yeah, right.
The marketing had to match what we created.
Yep.
It's ironic when somebody creates something so novel and new and spent the time to develop and then is like, let's just make a TV commercial. You know, nothing wrong with that, but like, what are you doing? Like, no, it has to match.
Yeah.
They have to be aligned. Otherwise, you're just not, what are you doing? You're like, the marketer just dropped the ball.
That's right. That's right. I love this conversation. I feel like you and I could talk for
like,
hours.
like 10 hours. I know. It's crazy.
I want to give folks an opportunity to maybe, first, what are like the 3 things that people should like internalize from this conversation?
Okay.
And then I think next, like, what's one great example where it's like, dude, I mean, you just said cereal, but like, is there one other that you're like, they're killing it? Like, go look them up kind of thing.
Yeah, gosh. So I think, to kind of synthesize a bit of our chat, I would probably say, consumerism has a long way to go in healthcare. We all consume it, and it's okay as a consumer to, bold language here maybe, but to demand better customer service. I think we have been conditioned as a society to tolerate it in a way that is, I don't know why. You wouldn't bring your car to the mechanic and leave and it doesn't work and be like, well, I guess I'll just pay them again to fix it. Like, you wouldn't do that. But in healthcare, that's what happens. Like, I don't know how we got to this place of tolerating the consumer isn't in charge. I mean, I know we have insurance and employers paying for the insurance, so I'm not really, but no, we're paying for it. You're paying for it. We're still paying for it. Like, every company's here to make money. So is the health insurance company. So is you're right. So like, I would say just advocate for being a healthcare consumer in whatever capacity you can or feel needed to. I think that would be important. 2, I think if you do experience if you do have a terrific experience somewhere, it is important to share that with the organization because at the same time, you should demand better. It is important for that group to hear that they are doing things well. And again, maybe say this for any company, but specific for healthcare, I think it would be really important for them to hear that they're doing it well. And as you and I both know, there are organizations that are investing in the customer experience and the user experience and making an effort to do that. And they'll need to hear that those things are happening. So take note. I think that's important. And the last thing I think I would say is, look for those organizations that are giving time, money, and energy back to the neighborhoods and the communities in which you live. Why did somebody sponsor your local softball team? Why are they helping clean up the greenway? Why are they looking at ways to support, lower income communities? How are they diversifying the workforce in some way? How are they exhibiting and how are they behaving beyond just what their product or their service is? And go support those organizations, right? I am a huge believer in supporting local, but not because it's a charity. You support local because they're really good at what they do. If they're not, then you would demand they do it better so that you're happy that they're local. The idea that, we support local, but it kind of sucks. Like, well, that isn't how the formula works. Like, they should be good at what they do, right? I remember I used to have this conversation with my beer buddies way back in the day. Like, we go to local breweries only. Well, are they good? Well, it's okay. Like, what are you doing? Then like, go to the ones that are great. And so you would find over time, the breweries in town that do a great job are the ones that keep the clients.
Yeah, right.
They just happen to be local. Like, that's how that works.
Yeah.
So those might be the 3 things I think about. Did those make sense? Is that okay?
Totally.
Yeah. And then in terms of like an example of an organization locally that I think does this really well. Let me think. So like, I think that cereal example is really a good one.
I've got one I'll throw out there.
Yeah, throw it out there.
So Charlotte. I've been really impressed with Charlotte FC.
Oh, great example.
Right? Because
great example.
They came out the gate with, I mean, tons of energy, right?
So much energy.
And they've spent a lot of time and money on like cultivating an atmosphere where even if they lose, people are pumped. You know what I mean? And there's a whole culture around it. And it's only been, like what, a couple of years?
3 years, maybe. Yeah. Something like that. Maybe 4, maybe 3 or 4. It's new. It's very new.
Yeah.
Very new.
I went to a game the first time, like this season, and it was so wild because it was with a friend. I'm not a big soccer, guy, but a couple of my buddies are. And so it took me to the game and went, and it was like, oh, hey man, you got to turn around. We're like doing the thing.
Yes.
Now.
You don't look at the field. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was oh, okay. And then the whole, the national anthem,
He doesn't sing.
Yeah. They'd like cut and the whole audio. And I was like, I was getting chills, man. I was like proud of the city.
It's incredible.
I was like, wow, this is really, and I think there's two things that stood out to me the most. One was it's so deeply rooted in the culture, right? Like, and I think that's a really key component of this, like knowing your audience, knowing your consumer, knowing your customer, right?
Yep.
And like they're very aware of like the types of people who really are passionate about football or soccer.
Yeah.
And I think the other one that was really important or really interesting to me is like they started to create these traditions that like the fans feel like, oh, this is our tradition, but it's like tied to the brand. And anyway, so that whole thing to me was just like, they're doing a really good job.
I love that. It's a terrific example. Terrific. And I'll add a couple more things to it. I do follow a lot of soccer, and I will tell you that what they did that I think was brilliant is they didn't, bear with me here, they didn't Americanize MLS.
Yeah.
They found the 125-year-old soccer teams, Liverpool, Manchester, Chelsea, these places, Real Madrid, like they have these traditions baked in with generations pass tickets on to one another. Yep. They know people by name. They believe these things. They have chants. They have songs. They have moment. And they replicated that so well here in Charlotte. They mimicked it to the degree that it allowed them to establish a foundation of this is what soccer is going to be like. Then they did what you just described. Then they took it a step further, which is now let's make our own versions of these traditions. Let's make our own chants, our own songs. The supporters area, I don't know if they're shooting, like flares are going off and they're waving flags, and like it's just like a giant, maybe poor word here, but like a huge mosh pit. It's not, it's safe, but like it's a giant conglomeration of these supporter groups, which is just so historically European and South American, and just what a wonderful job they did replicating something versus like turning it into the American version of soccer.
Yeah, totally.
Which is just not, it's just not, right?
So
I love that example. This is a terrific one. I would agree 100%. Good one. Real good one.
Well, look, man, awesome having you on the show.
Yes, thanks for having me, man.
Appreciate it. Where can folks find you online?
So I am, so you can go to primtos.com if you want to check out our little consultancy, which is cool. I'm on, LinkedIn is really probably the best spot to find me. That is really kind of my version of social. Blair Primis on LinkedIn is probably the best spot.
Right on.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, man. Folks, you can find me, drewburdick.com and Drew H. Burdick pretty much on every social platform. Blair, always great. Looking forward to doing it again, man.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
All right, man.
Good stuff.
Hey there. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you could take a second, hit the subscribe button below. It would really mean the world. I'm trying to make some great content for you every week by interviewing folks and hearing what they have to say about building great experiences. I try to share tips and tricks and things like that. Anyways, take a second, hit that like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Thanks, guys.